शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि। त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि। ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि। तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु। अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै। तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव। समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु। अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं। शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा। कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः। श्रुतं मे गोपाय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव। ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्मृतमस्मि। द्रविणगुंसवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः। इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते। पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि। सर्वं ब्रह्म उपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां। मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत्। अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु। तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम्। आविराविर्मयेधि वेदस्य महानि ईस्थः। श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनाधितेन। अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि। तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु। अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं नो अपि वातय मनः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः। भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः। स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः। व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः। स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः। स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः। स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तं हदेवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यानस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततो मानतोऽस्मि। ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरे तुल्यं निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्गोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यत्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये यस्यैव स्फुरणं सदात्मकम् असत्कल्पार्थकं भासते साक्षात् तत्त्वमसीति वेदवचसा यो बोधयत्याश्रितान् यत्साक्षात्करणाद् भवेन्न पुनरावृत्तिर्भवाम्भोनिधौ तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नानाचिद्रघटोदरस्थितमहादीपप्रभाभास्वरं ज्ञानं यस्य तु चक्षुरादिकरणद्वारा बहिस्पन्दते जानामीति तमेव भान्तमनुभात्येतत्समस्तं जगत् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये देहं प्राणमपीन्द्रियानपि चलां बुद्धिं च शून्यं विदुः स्त्रीबालान्दजडोपमास्त्वहमिति भ्रान्ताभृशं वादिनः मायाशक्तिविलासकल्पितमहाव्यामोहसंहारिणे तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये So as one studies the Shastra and lives up to it, one thing becomes clearer and clearer to a point where it becomes a very obvious fact, which is this. We begin by not understanding anything about the world or the God, creation, and so on. This is how the life starts. This is how the expression of a life starts. The life doesn't start, but the expression, like a new baby being born and so on, and as you grow up, this is the normal way of looking at it. Then, as one grows up and hopefully becomes more thoughtful and more mature, you begin to investigate what is this whole thing all about. And in that quest, in that inquiry, obviously the role of Ishvara, God, comes into play, because it's a very natural thing about who is the creator. And so you investigate that, you start thinking about it, you discuss it, we learn something about it. So then comes the second stage where you feel there is a creation. Ishvara created this world, and there are certain rules that you have to play with, and if you play with those rules, by the rules, not with the rules, but by the rules, then you become happier and so on. So this is a very broad stage of the more mature inquiry that takes place in our life, and you and I think, are certainly in that phase of the life. But then as you progress further, there is yet another phase that comes in, which has been said all along in the Shastra. It's not as though it is only revealed at the end. If you look and study back all of the Shastric literature, you find this fact, but somehow in the growth phase of ourselves, we ignore it. We don't understand it. Which is this? This is what I was really trying to get in. What you find is, yes, there is Ishvara, yes, there is Jagat, yes, there is creation of the Jagat as you and I, but this is not created by Ishvara. Because in the second phase, along with the assumptions and my understanding of what it is that Ishvara is a creator, it generates a lot of unanswerable questions. Why is there so much dukkha in this life? Why is there terrorism and terrible accidents and fire and so much so? Why did Ishvara create all this? All those questions are a natural outcome of the second phase of our life. Those get answered in the third phase of our understanding. And that phase is this. Ishvara never created this world. Never. Did not. Then, this is the way the entire cosmos is. It was never created. This is the way it is. So there's no reason to get into this side lane, which is very frustrating. The side lane is, who created this and why, and what are the consequences, and the why of it. The why is perhaps the most important question. It just bugs us. All these are answered in the third phase, which is the mature phase that one does not come to until you have studied for a long period of time. It could happen very quickly if you are mature, but usually you have to cross through this. And the third phase says this. Third phase says it is not really created by Ishvara. It's not like he's sitting there on one corner and saying, okay, I think I'm going to do this. This is the nature of the cosmos. What is the nature of the cosmos? The nature of the cosmos is that if you do not see that the underlying content of the cosmos is joy and happiness in the form of Shiva, So the word Shiva is indicative of the Swarupa of the Jagat, the Swarupa of Ishvara, the Swarupa of the Jiva. In all three aspects of it, Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, has one Swarupa, which is Shiva, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam, which is ultimate joy and happiness without any hindrance, without any obstacles, without any conditionality, nothing. That's the Swarupa. That's the very nature of it. Just like heat is the nature of fire. Similarly, the nature of the whole cosmos is Shiva. And if you don't know it, you have problems in life. If you know it, all problems magically melt away. Like all the problems of dreaming are magically melted away. It's not systematically melted, it's gone. This is the nature of the cosmos. And so all questions as to why are irrelevant. Really speaking, it is just a nature of the cosmos that ignorance causes problems, and lack of ignorance, removal of ignorance, reveals the truth that it is really nothing but joy. This is something one has to really grasp. It's not easily graspable, but that is a fact. You cannot fight with the fact. Satyam eva jayate. You can make any kind of arguments against it and fight and have discussions and question answers and so on. The fact is a fact. This is a fact. Really, the reason I'm bringing this up is because of the importance of Brahma Sutra. I was just thinking of it. It just occurred to me that maybe I should just start with this concept, this understanding. And this is where Brahma Sutra comes up in understanding this. This has to be kept in mind. Sometimes you don't know this until you've gotten deep into it, but certainly the Brahma Sutra needs to be understood with this vision in mind. That it is not a creation. It's not deliberately created. There's no one, this is the way it is. So in doing so, let's move forward in understanding the importance of Brahma Sutra. So the next point is that in all of our lives, the expression of Shiva, the expression of Ishvara, Paramatma and Parameshwara are both pretty much the same. One is Paramatma is the Nimitta Karanam, and Parameshwara is the Vivarta Upadana Karanam. But they are both the same, really. And so the personality and the personality is just an expression of the person. And so Parameshwara and Paramatma are the same. But in the expression of Parameshwara, there are three Shaktis that we are all given, and we all know that. So we have Kriya Shakti, which means the power to do something. All beings have this power. And we have Jnana Shakti, which is the power to know and to dispel ignorance about something. And the third Shakti is the Ichha Shakti, which is the power to desire, to go forward, to improve, or to do something or to know something. So in other words, Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti are two main Shaktis, and the Ichha Shakti is to have the desire to utilize both the Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti for my progress. This is the way it is. So everybody has those three powers. So now we come to Brahma Sutra. The Brahma Sutra says, listen, given that you have these three powers, you need to understand the truth about the relationship between Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti, and of course Ichha Shakti is common to both of them. You need to understand the truth about what is the relationship between Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti. And one of the aspects of our Shastra, Vedanta Shastra, is that in order for you to ascertain the truth and the relationship between Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti, you should use three filters to ascertain all this. Three filters. So one of them is Shruti, one of them is Yukti, and the third one is Anubhava. So the inquiry itself says it would be very good if you could employ these three tools, if you may. These three filters, three tools, in order to really look through to understand exactly what is going on. So one of them is Shruti. Shruti means what is going on here, because when you and I are born, we are equipped with seeing things outside of us, but we cannot see it ourselves. Like, for example, the very simple thing to see, that it's very obvious that that the fact that you are seeing forms throughout your life from morning to evening, even during the dreams, the only time you have a respite is when you have a deep sleep. But in all other cases, you are seeing forms, various forms, red, blue, flat, round, everything. You are continuously seeing forms. If you are seeing forms, it's very obvious that you have a pramana for seeing forms. You have a natural sadhana for seeing the forms, which is the eye. Right? It's very obvious. You cannot see forms without having the ability to have the eyesight. Not just the eye itself, but the entire paraphernalia of seeing through the eye. It's very obvious. So if you have forms, that means that there must be a seer of the forms. Now the swarupa of the eye you cannot see. You cannot see. Because the eye is meant for seeing things, not for seeing itself. It cannot see itself. And so, but you can see yourself If you have a clear mirror in front of you, some reflecting surface, then you can see the swarupa of the pramana of how to see things. Very similarly is the case of what is going on in my life, because I see a number of things and I make conclusions about myself as a limited being. I am also a jiva that has the ability to cognize and so on. So that I can see. But what is my... So look at this analogy. Just like you have sights that automatically tell you that there is something called the eye. You cannot see the sights without the eye. It's very obvious to even a small child. You can explain this. Similarly is the fact that you can cognize the entire creation, but you cannot cognize yourself, like you cannot see the eye itself without some help. That help is the Shruti. The Shruti says, don't you see? It reflects you. And here, this we will take this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we will take it some other time. This is what is called Chitta Shuddhi. Chitta Shuddhi means that you have to understand what Shruti is saying with a calm and clear mind, not an argumentative mind. With sampradaya, you have to see this. And if you see this, what you do is you see yourself, which is the pramana for you cognizing the world. So this is where Shruti comes in. Then Yukti comes in. Yukti means that Yukti is like Mananam. It is like Chitta Shuddhi. That you have to understand that what the Shruti is saying, which is completely contrary to my understanding. Because my natural understanding is that I am a very limited being. The Shruti says, no, you are not a limited being. You are the only unlimited being in the whole creation. And I say, what? You must be kidding me. Shruti says, do I have a reason for kidding you? Do I want something from you? Am I of such a jocular nature that just gives a joke without any substance? No, I mean what I say. And one day you will understand it. Stay with it. And understand it with reasoning. As you know, we have talked about this before, that the difference between Brahma and Prama, they are opposites to each other. The difference between Brahma and Prama is the more you examine the Brahma, the more vague it gets and finally disappears. All it requires is an inquiry. And the Prama is just the opposite. If you don't inquire into it, it just looks very vague. But the more you get closer to it, it becomes more and more real. Isn't this the best way to distinguish between what is a notion and what is a fact? Of course it is. And so you have to really examine it with the yukti. And one sidelight to this, which I will just briefly mention, and then I'll come back to the main line of what I'm I'm not done yet. I still have a few more things to point out before we close the loop with Brahma Sutra. And so Swami Maheshananji had pointed out very beautifully, really, is that a Brahma, a Yukti, not Brahma, Yukti without Shruti is useless. This is a very interesting thing that he pointed out. I didn't look at it that way before he pointed this out. What he said was that if you look at the Nayayikas, Nyaya, which is the modern science, this is the mother of the science, is called Nyaya. Nyaya is also Yukti based. Nayayikas, the people who believe in Yukti, pure Yukti, they may be right for a considerable portion of their Yukti, but they miss the boat because they just study and study and study, and they are disconnected from who they really are and how the study is made. These are far apart. It becomes academic. Even the today's academicians, all you can see this. I remember one time, I'll give you an incident that happened. I remember the time when I truly appreciated the teachings of Swami Dayananda Saraswati. A year or so had passed, and I studied more and more his methodology, his thinking. Whenever he would come to the local area, I would actually arrange for them and I remember there was a talk in Berkeley that we arranged, early morning classes at 6:30. And I used to live in Los Gatos at that time. And I would get up at 4 o'clock and get ready and drive all the way up to Berkeley to listen to him for an hour and a half. And then I will come back and then have a breakfast, and then I'll go to my job in IBM in San Jose every day for about 7 days. So I did a lot of that, and I was very interested in understanding exactly what Swamiji was saying. I still have some notes from that, when I used to write everything down. And one time Swamiji said in that whole thing that pure yukti is useless unless and until you apply to your own life. So this is what Swami Maheshananji was also pointing out. What he was saying was that if you look at Nayayikas, they just argue and argue and argue. So I was going to tell you about this one event which I neglected to. I wanted to close the loop on that. So as soon as I started following Swami Dayanandji, then I started making plans that wherever he was, I would go there. He was traveling all over US. And at one time, he went to Toronto. And I had some flexibility in going to visits on my business trips. So I also arranged for a business trip to Toronto. I was not lying. It was something that could be done. But I timed it so that I could listen to Swami Dayanandji. That event is very clear in my mind. So as part of his talks, there was an evening event organized by some local people where there was a discussion about Vedanta and Ishvara by a panel of people. There were 2 or 3 people. Swami Dayanandji was one of them. Another one was a professor from McGill University. And he was a professor of Hinduism in McGill University. I don't remember his last, I think he was a Bengali gentleman, Banerjee or somebody. I don't remember that. But he was a head of the department of the Hinduism department, and he was there. And I just looked at the dialogue that was going on. There was a person who would propose some concepts, and then the panel will discuss it and so on. And the professor was just going on and becoming very argumentative that no, this Shankara's view is not the right one. That's only one of several different ones and so on. And Swamiji was just, he didn't know what to do. I mean, he knew what to do, but he didn't want to really ruffle the feathers. And he just said, that's not really true. He wanted to say the Sampradaya is the truth Sampradaya about Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads and so on and so forth. You cannot take... But this gentleman was... he says, no, the facts are different. All kinds of stuff. So this academic way of looking at things. So Swami Maheshananji pointed out that really the Nyayikas, in many cases, their arguments are correct, but they miss the connection with Shruti and also Anubhava. See, that's the point that I think we should be clear about. That all three of them needs to be consistent. Now we come to Brahma Sutra. Okay? All this half hour of talk and so on and so forth, I hope that's useful to you anyway. But it's just a sidelight to the Brahma Sutra. Now let's come back to connect to the Brahma Sutra. So, what Brahma Sutra is saying is that given that in the cosmos there are these two Shaktis, which is Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti, given that, you need to understand the true relationship between Kriya Shakti and Jnana Shakti in order to understand the true nature of the cosmos, which is, it is basically joyful, but the lack of understanding of it creates problems. And that is really the argument that Adi Shankara gave to say that normally the knowledge of things does not give you fruits right away. True. Because that was the argument by the Karma Mimamsa people, that jnanam doesn't really do anything. You have to do something, you have to cook. Knowing of cooking doesn't make any difference at all. And therefore, just to say Satyam Jnanam Anantam, Ayam Atma Brahma and so on is jnanam, but what does it do? It doesn't do anything. And also, it is not our anubhava. So they are also saying that it is against our anubhava. Anubhava means like personal experience. So he says, look at it. Your personal experience is that the knowledge of cooking does not give you the fruits of cooking. You have to eat it. So there Shankara had pointed out, you are right. I am not a fool. I also understand that. But please understand that if the ignorance of the fact is causing the problem, then the removal of the ignorance also is the solution. You don't need to do anything. And so there Rajju Sarpa example comes in. The Dashamoham, the 10th man example comes in. And freedom from dream also comes in. All those kinds of things. Those are exceptions, possible exceptions. Praptasya prapti. Those are all acquisition of the already acquired. It's possible. It's not the normal way of looking at things, but what can we say? This is a valid exception. Well, this is how it was argued. So now the crux of the matter, which we are going to study now in the remaining half hour or so that we have left, is that the relationship between Kriya and Jnanam, Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti, the relationship between them needs to be properly understood. And the relationship, in summarizing all of the facts that we have been looking at it, that in the normal case, Jnana Shakti is first and Kriya Shakti solves the problem. Isn't it? Normal case means in the Laukika Jnanam, Laukika world, in the worldly experience, we find exactly the same thing. That Jnanam sets you up for Kriya, and Kriya completes it. But this is only true for apraptasya praptihi. When you really don't have something, there this relationship applies. The opposite is true when it is praptasya praptihi. In praptasya praptihi, Kriya sets you up, but Jnanam completes it. In Laukika. In the Paramarthika Satyam, this is even more true. And so that fact is kept in mind in the Brahma Sutra. The Brahma Sutra should be looked upon as a couple of points to make here. It is definitely yukti pradhana, isn't it? Because you also have this view. This Brahma Sutra is just some logical steps and logical way of looking at it. I don't know if it is useful to me or not. This is not true. It is logical because it reflects, yes, it's yukti pradhana, it is definitely emphasizing the logic. But the logic is nothing but a restatement of what Shruti is saying, and also it should be looked upon as your own anubhava. So the logic is not an isolated dry logic like the Nayayikas do, but it is really a useful application of your own power to see the truth of it. So now let's proceed further. So we had, at the last time, we had question and answers with the Karma Mimamsa, the Karma Kanda. All that was done. And we had completed that. Now Shankara takes up a new objection. So this is what is called a Vrittikara Matam. So he takes up Vrittikara Matam. So Matam means the viewpoint. Vrittikara means the doer of Vritti. So this is an interesting historical fact. He does not name who the Vrittikara is, but refers to it very seriously. So what it means is that there was a prevalent view at that time, which by the way reflects our current view also, as you will see in a minute. So it's not as though it is just purely theoretical. It's very much our own experience, and you will see that in a minute how. But in any case, the Vrittikara is some intelligent person who differed with the Mimamsakas, but also differed with the Vedantins. So it was a unique view. And a valid, in some cases, a very valid view, not easily dismissible. So actually, Shankara spends a lot of time in arguing against it. He takes it very seriously. So this is what is called, in the modern parlance, or even in the old parlance, jnana karma samuchayavada. Jnana karma samuchayavada. Jnana karma samuchaya means a combination of karma and jnanam gives moksha. Any one of them in isolation does not, but a combination of them gives you moksha. This is the matam of the Vrittikara. Okay? And this, by the way, is Swami Paramarthananda points out that in the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya by Adi Shankara, this fact is discussed very extensively. And so this Vrittikara Matam is taken quite seriously, as much as the Bhashya on the Bhagavad Gita by Shankaracharya features this quite a bit. And I do recall that. I didn't look it up in detail, but I just thought I would mention it to you. So now let's look at what is the Vrittikara saying and how is it different from the Mimamsakas and how is it different from the Vedantins. Let's look at that. So the Purva Mimamsaka, the Karma Mimamsaka, Karma Kanda says there is no such thing as Brahman. There is Ishvara, but we don't know. The main thing is you should just look upon your own state. Don't worry about Ishvara and Brahman and all those kinds of things. You just follow the Vedas. And the Vedas say if you perform all these yajnas properly, with loyalty, with accuracy, with longevity, you will go to a better loka. You'll go to Swargaloka. And there in Swargaloka, you will go to, even if you do upasana, etc., then you will go to higher lokas. In the end, you will get connected to some kind of a moksha. This is what the Karmakandin is saying. He says there is no Brahman. And to say that it is, the whole thing is nothing but Brahman, we don't agree with it. We had already argued with them that, listen, the Vedas are saying that shuddling of analysis, all the 6 things. It starts with the expectation of Brahman, repeats it, praises it, summarizes it. How can you say there is not Brahman? So he was unconvinced. Vrittikara agrees with it. Agrees with it. He says, yes, Vedanta really does reveal Brahma. However, so up to this point, he is agreeing with the Vedantins, disagreeing with the Purva Mimamsa, this Vrittikara Matam. Now he differs from Vedanta. He says, I agree with you that Vedas and Vedanta does reveal Brahman. I am with you. This, I don't agree with all the Purva Mimamsas and so on. It's the Uttara Mimamsa which is Vedanta. Vedanta is called Uttara. Uttara means later. Purva means that first. This is what is called Purva Paksha and Siddhanta. So we agree with the Siddhantis, but we do not agree with you saying Jnanam alone gives you moksha. You have to do some upasana. And in support of this viewpoint, he quotes some facts from our own Upanishads. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it says Atma iti eva upasita, called Vidya Sutra. It is very clearly, it says that may you do upasana on the Atma. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Upanishad is very much part of the Uttara Mimamsa. He says, you are saying it. So then we say our answer to that is, I know it is saying it, but in more cases it says that just jnanam alone gives you moksha. Why are you looking at it selectively? In a couple of places it says, may you do upasana. And more of the cases it says, jnanam alone is there. So why are you taking it selectively? Why don't you consider a whole thing? If you're looking at for quantity standpoint, not qualitative but quantitative standpoint, there also you are misrepresenting. So then the Vrittikara comes back with an answer to this question of ours. That was our question, that why are you not taking all the instances of jnanam? Remember I had quoted the 10 different Upanishad things as supporting the viewpoint that this is an exception, not the normal. And the exception was praptasya praptihi, like Rajju Sarpa. And so because remember the Purva Mimamsa were saying, where does it say that you are the exception? Because he was saying, okay, I understand that there is an exception. But how do you know that Vedanta falls under the exception? So we said, okay, glad you asked. We gave all of this is what is called Samanvaya. So we did all the Samanvaya about exactly all the Upanishads agreeing on the fact that this is what it is. Jnanam alone gives you moksha. So we now turn it to the Vrittikara. That was old. Now in the new one, the Vrittikara, we are discussing this. Vrittikara comes out with another answer. He says, aha, I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is that the instances of all the Upanishads saying that jnanam alone gives you the moksha, I accept that. But, there's a big but. You know, jnanam and vidya, knowledge and awareness, has two meanings. Has two meanings. One meaning is pure jnanam. The other meaning is upasana. Dhyanam. You see, he makes a reference on this. So the other meaning is dhyana. So, and I think the one way to kind of weigh these two, the difference between jnanam and upasana, this is an interesting and important thing to see. In our experience, it is very much like learning to ride a bike. Two-wheeler, not a three-wheeler, but a two-wheeler. Because the two-wheeler requires a certain skill. If a child is growing up, the first thing that you do is to give them a three-wheeler. Because in the three-wheeler, all you need to do is to learn how to pedal. One foot forward, then the other foot forward, and that also is not easy, but then you can figure that out. The child in one sitting itself, with the help of an adult, can figure out how to do this motion. If you do that motion, the child discovers that my bike is going forward and he's very joyful. Wow! So he wants to do that. In this effort, the balancing between falling to the left or right is not there because there are three wheels. On the back side, there are two wheels that are very well balanced. So the child just has to concentrate on pedaling, not on balancing. Then comes the next. After a while, it probably takes about a year or so of doing it, so that now comes the child who's given a two-wheel bike, and that is much more difficult because you are pedaling it. Pedaling is also important because if you're just standing still, then it's even more difficult to balance. But if you're pedaling, that motion gives you some ability to balance, but you're still not balancing because you fall left or right. So with the help of a adult who holds the back seat, you get into the understanding on how to ride a bike without falling left or right. This is called the balancing. Now, so the jnanam and upasana are something like this. If you wanted to see a simpler example. How? And by the way, the same thing is true for swimming. So in biking and swimming, learning to balance is like upasana. So in upasana, what you are supposed to do is to find a quiet place and be with yourself. Remove all of the external obstacles, thoughts, etc. So this would be savikalpa samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi. And you go back to just the stillness of the mind, which is not natural. Not natural, because the mind is always falling left or right, either in the back, on the past or future. Yeah, I can tell you this is interesting. For the last, several weeks, a lot of things have happened where I have not been able to answer doing that. Some people have asked me to review some books. Aim for Seva wants me to come up with a video. Srini has asked me to record a video. Then a group that is studying something has asked me to review. I have a lot of pending things. And a lot of personal things and so on. So it's very interesting. The first thing that happens to me when I get up is that all these things kind of merge together and says, oh, by the way, you haven't done this. So now I have to sort out on the day to day, what can I do today? And so the future also is something that impinges on me. The past also impinges. And so I am now trying to meditate between those two and keeping a sort of like a balance, just like a bicyclist is either following left or right, but it wants to maintain. And it's not able to do that in the case of a child. And so it tries to do it. This is like upasana. So dhyanam, also called dhyanam. So you try to look at Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. You may have a glimpse here and there, but then it just gets interrupted. I am a jiva, I am a jiva. Like that. There comes a point where after dedication over a long period of time, the bicyclist does not have to worry about falling. You are now purely navigating, where do I go? And the balancing is no longer an issue. effortlessness. This can be called jnana. This is really the truth. So what happens is that the upasana done over a long period of time doesn't need to be done anymore because it becomes very natural. It becomes like the back of your hand. So you don't have to keep on doing upasana, because just like a bike, you tell the person, aren't you worried about falling? He says, no, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm not worried about falling. I'm just trying to avoid cars, and that's all. But no, that's done with. In the beginning, in a couple of days, I was over that. So this should be seen as a kind of a simpler example between jnanam and upasana. Okay? So now comes, look at the argument and the fallacy of the arguments. This is where the Shankara Bhashya and the Shankara view, and not just the Shankara, but the entire Sampradayic view should become very relevant. It says, no, you cannot keep on doing upasana. And so I'll come back to that in a second. I still have another 10-15 minutes, so I think I'll defer to it that. But here it's so the Vrittikara says there are two meanings of the word jnanam. One is upasana and the other one is jnanam. Why don't we, all these instances that you point out where it says, the Upanishad says jnanam itself gives you moksha, why don't we substitute upasana to the word jnanam? Because they are interchangeable. So what it really means to say is that you keep on doing upasana and then you will gain moksha. Anyway, at the end, he summarizes. So this is what is called jnana karma samuchaya. So you see, upasana is also karma. Karma means a way of doing something. So just like in the case of bicycle also, your karma means you are very cognizant of acquiring a balance. Balance has been acquired yet, but you are trying to acquire the balance. So this is what karma is. So similarly, upasana is trying to do it. And so the Vrittikara now summarizes his view and says, listen, here's the situation. You first do jnanam, then you do upasana. And in the end, upasana comes. And without upasana, you cannot gain moksha. This is his argument. Okay? So this is the matam, which is called Vrittikara matam. Shankara now answers this elaborately. Okay, I think I should be able to finish it, but I have to hurry. So let me do this. So Shankara answers this from different angles. He defines moksha. First, he defines moksha. And he defines moksha from different angles. So, here he is saying, he makes a point, by the way, he criticizes upasana. Upasana means bhakti, it means just closing your eyes and just becoming one with Ishvara, so he criticizes it. And this really rankles a lot of people. That the Vedantins, why are they criticizing Upasana? It's a very natural thing. You should bow and do bhakti. Without bhakti, jnanam is not fruitful. So here Shankara points out, please understand, I am not criticizing Upasana or bhakti per se. What I am criticizing is the role of Upasana in gaining moksha. So this is an important thing to see. Upasana and karma comes prior to jnanam, not after jnanam. This is a very, very important and interesting and crucial thing to see in our own lives, how we approach it. So we will talk more about it, but I'm just giving you the substance of it. So, in doing so, here the moksha is defined as something that needs to be established, that is to be established, and he establishes it with some definitions that we should be able to relate to. So, for example, he says, moksha is asharirata. Asharirata. Sharira means a body. And the word sharira in Sanskrit means shiryamanatvat sharira, one that decays. Is something which right in the front of our eyes is decaying. As it happens in our lives, after a while it is apakshiyate, and then all these, your skin becomes wrinkly. You can see that slowly. This is called shiryamanatvam. So sharira. So Shankara defines moksha as asharirita. Asharirita means nothing to do with the body. Sharirita means the status of having a sharira, and asharirita means not having a status for sharirita. And he says, so his argument is samsara. Samsara means the concept of change and limitation in my life, which is what characterizes our life. Our characteristic of the life that we lead is, the word samsara means samyak sarati, which is slowly decaying, moving, changing. This is all samsara. Sasharirita, he samsara. The concept of having a body, your body is also decaying, and your concept of the world also is slowly changing. This is called sasharirita. And moksha is freedom from sharira sambandha, that I have nothing to do with this. As we know, asangoham hi ayam atma. It's very interesting. Remember I talked about Paramatma and Parameshwara. So one is the Nimitta Karanam is Paramatma, And Parameshwara is Upadana Karanam. And the Upadana Karanam is also Nimitta Upadana Karanam, which is also unchanging in its own nature but appears to change. Anyway, you know what? I'll let me not go into that. I'll come back to it some other time because it requires some more explanation. So forget about that. But for the time being, moksha is lack of sharira sambandha, sakshitvam. This is moksha. We have studied that. But look at the argument that Shankara is using in order to dismantle the fact that upasana is necessary, bhakti is necessary at the end. We argue that bhakti is important in the beginning, not in the end. That's all. So, upasana or bhakti, so this is an interesting thing to see, is not a sadhya, it is a sadhana. You see? So the Vrittikara Matam says it is the sadhya. It's not the sadhana. We say just the opposite. It is not something to be established. It is a means of establishing it. And what I said earlier, which is true also, that the Vrittikara Matam is not just purely historical. That, in the 8th century there was a Vrittikara who took on Shankara. No, this is relevant even today. Because you ask the average person, I will give you my example of my own father and lots of other people who also said that, listen, you're just studying something now in a book, now you have to apply it. And our own questions are like that. We have to see this isn't the way it is. One day with doing all this, you will see that this is a very natural phenomena. You are already praptasya prapti, nothing. So this is what is called kritakrityata. Whatever needs to be done is done. I am done. I am purnaha. There is no meditation, there is no upasana, there is no bhakti, no nothing. I am the complete being, because that is the true understanding of Ishvara and Paramatma. That will come one day. But until then, yes, upasana is good, but the upasana is not the end, because that means it will stay. No, it doesn't stay, it goes. So therefore we say, upasana is sashariritam. See, this is a good argument. Remember this. So we have to be very pure in the way we argue. You cannot do upasana unless you have a sharira. So you have to be a karta, you have to be a bhokta, you have to be someone who is trying, isn't it? So that's very part and parcel of the definition of upasaka and upasana. But moksha is ashariritvam. So now the Vrittikara Matam says, okay, I see your point. Moksha is ashiririta. But why can't we do this? That the normal upasana that you do with the devatas, like Ganesha, or Vishnu, or any other devatas, there it is with Sharira, but what you do with Ishvara. This is a special kind of upasana with Ishvara. There you become asharirata. And in fact, why can't it lead to asharirita? I accept your way of looking at things, but why can't we say that it becomes asharirita? So we said that, listen, we have already proven all of this and so on and so forth. And the one last argument, I was just trying to summarize some of the things. I won't go into the details of that, and I think we'll end the class with this. Vrittikara says, wait, okay, I get what you're saying, but you have a problem if you do this. So we say, what's your problem? What is the problem? He says, haven't you been saying that the goal of Shastra is to understand that you are not connected to the body, etc., while you are living in this life itself? You have been saying that you don't have to die to go to Swarga. In fact, you have freedom in this life itself. Have you been saying that? So we said, yes, we do say that, absolutely. He says, aha. Now we have a problem, and let me point out. The problem is, so you call it as Jivan Mukta, freedom while alive, Jivan Eva Mukta. So we said, yes. He says, then what about the Jivan Mukta? The Jivan Mukta has a Sharira. So you cannot say the moksha is ashariritvam, is lack of Sharira, because now you have an internal fallacy. That means you have to die before you become muktaha, mokshaha, because you yourself said that moksha is equal to ashariritvam. And now if you say that Jivan Mukta is already free, but he has a body, how can you say that? Shankara says, no. There is no fallacy. This is all works very well. He says that the Jivan Mukta has asharirata as the thought. Others think of him as a body. He doesn't think of himself as the body. This is a fact. So he says, no, we are not bothered by that fact. It is still the same as we always say, and so we don't agree with you, Vrittikara, your way of looking at it, and so on. So this kind of a dialogue will continue, and now we will look at another way of looking at karma and so on and so forth next time. But this is the way that I hope that we are able to see it in terms of the conceptual discussion, which is very relevant in our own lives. Yes, so with that I close the class. Om Rahu Grasta Divankarendu Sadrisho Maya Samachadinat Sanmatra Karanopasamharanato Yo Bhut Sushuptaf Puman Pragaswap Samiti Prabodha Samaye Yah Pratyabhigyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye बाल्यादिषु अपि जाग्रदादिषु तथा सर्वास्वस्थास्वपि व्यावृत्तास्वनुवर्तमानमहमित्यन्तःस्फुरन्तं सदा स्वात्मानं प्रकटीकरोति भजतां यो मुद्रया भद्रया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये विश्वं पश्यति कार्यकारणतया स्वस्वामी सम्बन्धतः शिष्याचार्यतया तथैव पितृपुत्राद्यात्मना भेदतः स्वप्ने जागृति वा य एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये भूरम्भांस्य नलो नीलो अम्बरमहर्नार्थो हिमांशुः पुमान् इत्याभाति चराचरात्मकमिदं यस्यैव मूर्त्यष्टकम् नान्यत् किञ्चन विद्यते विमृशतां यस्मात् परस्मात् विभोः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये सर्वात्मत्वमिति स्फुटीकृतमिदं यस्मात्मुष्मिंस्तवे तेनास्य श्रवणात् तदर्थमननात् ध्यानात् च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्मत्वमहाविभूतिसहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येत् तत्पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यमव्याहतम् अशुभानि निराचष्टे तनोति शुभसन्ततिं स्मृतिमात्रेण यत्पुंसां ब्रह्मतन्मङ्गलं परम् अतिकल्याणरूपत्वात् नित्यकल्याणसंश्रयात् स्मर्तॄणां वरदत्वात् च ब्रह्मणं तन्मङ्गलं विदुः ओङ्कारश्चार्थशब्दश्च द्वावेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कण्ठं भित्त्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मान्माङ्गलिकौ उभौ ओमथ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ I guess we have some disturbance from others. I don't know what this is. I don't know whether we deleted the message or what's going on. I'm not sure. Okay. So we have a bot on our chat window spanning us. Interesting. So yeah, this is a new disturbance we have to figure out. I guess that's pretty common. Anyway, I'm sorry that distracted many of you. Uh, so we'll have to figure out how to deal with this. But thank you all, and we'll hopefully see you next Saturday. Okay, Hari Om.